thank you everyone for joining us today. We got a really special interview with Jain108, or just Jain as he likes to go by. How are you doing, Jain?
I'm good, thanks. I'm here in Byron Bay, the most easterly point of Australia. Yeah, so it's a beautiful day here, very sunny.
Very nice. Very nice. So, what is it your background in mathematics, and what led you to pursue it in the way in the sense you do today?
Okay, I started off getting high grades in high school. So when I was 18, I got in the top 2% in mathematics in the Australian maths exam. But the underlying emotional current that was driving me was that I had a very rich father who was pushing me to do medicine because he came from but we can't, both my parents are from Lebanon. And he was a very intelligent man that spoke 5 languages, but he couldn't. He failed to do medicine, which was his passion. So he translated that emotional need for me to do medicine. So by the time I was 13, I was studying medical textbooks. I was going to become a doctor. Well, one day the principal of the school said, "Jane, who are you? What do you want to do? Not what your father wants to do." And I said, "I'd like to pursue travel and write books." And so he set me up a course at Sydney University, and I followed that career to the dismay of my father. So my father currently now is a very rich man. He could be sponsoring my whole school, but he's the emotional drive for me to follow my passion and not rely on his approval. That I don't. I'm running on this emotional thing where I don't need my father's approval to validate my life's journey with sacred geometry. So because he's a Christian, and they believe that sacred geometry inherently is from the devil. That they're still in that old school of thought that why aren't you just teaching traditional maths, and why aren't you teaching Arabic maths, because we're Arabic, and I'm going around the world teaching Vedic maths, the Indian maths, which pretty much outrages my community. But so my research was, what's the truth of mathematics? So I abandoned a medical career. I woke up and I went and lived with Aboriginal people in New Guinea, which is our neighbor, just for 2 years, and I didn't see white people. And I learned sacred geometry just by watching, how the water spiraled, how a leaf fell, and I started eating whole foods again, all the root vegetables, and living on papayas. Which, being a Sydney suburban boy, it was kind of absent. I didn't really know who I was, so my quest took me all around the world, and at that time I believed that Vedic maths was the most important thing. But I currently believe that Vedic maths is one arm of the 5-pointed star. We have to learn other elements like the golden mean, platonic solids, to make the holistic approach to mathematics fundamental and universal. So I'm still discovering. I'm still basically a researcher, even though I still travel and I still teach children locally here. My aim is to put all my life's work online. Like, if my prayer 10 years ago was, "Oh, I want everyone in the world to learn sacred geometry," the answer to that will go online. It's not what I wanted to do. I'm okay with computers, but I realize now that the fulfillment of my prayer is the internet somehow, because now I can make a living through the internet. I travel around the world thanks to ebooks. All my friends said, "When are you going to do ebooks?" And as soon as I did ebooks, I realized I could live off the income of the internet, which gives me the freedom that I have today. So at any time, like my daughter's in San Francisco right now, she's just been there a year, and she wants to live there. So we're organizing my 4th tour to America sometime in 6 months or something like that. So,
Okay.
which
Sounds
means
great.
I've got the freedom. I'm not trapped in a job. I don't work for anyone. I follow my passion,
Very nice.
and I'm still cracking codes. I like to call it that. I
Very
crack
nice.
codes.
Well, you
and-
mentioned a little while back that the Vedic mathematics is only one arm of potentially 5, as represented
Yes.
with Pentagram. What are the other 4 disciplines
Okay.
of mathematics?
The where I started from was the thing called magic squares. So that's another arm. So magic squares is boxes of numbers where they're all harmonically aligned, as above, so below. It's the
Okay.
center of the Tibetan calendar, actually.
Okay.
And then magic squares, what happened is that when we turned magic squares into art by joining 1 to 2 to 3, we ended up with atomic structure. So that led to the next arm called the art of number. So from magic squares, I learned the main arm, the 5th arm, the top, the head of the pentacle, is the thesis that I'm running with, is called the translation of number into sacred symbol. So these magic squares and Fibonacci numbers, they created exquisite symbols that, you know, people like the Templars and all the royalty in the world, they all claim sacred symbols. And I found the mathematical underpinning of all sacred symbols. So the other two arms to complete it would be the 5 Platonic solids and the Fibonacci sequence, which produces the golden mean spiral, which pretty much is my passion. The golden mean is what, if we had to teach one thing in school now, it would be getting children to learn the Fibonacci sequence and starting to apply it in real day-to-day life, like using solar panels based on 2134, like a tree. And apparently I read some article, some American 12-year-old boy built some solar panels based on like a sunflower on a tree and as the sun was tracking across the sky from east to west, it was always collecting light due to the specific angles of the solar panels based on the Fibonacci sequence, and it produced double the energy, and they still haven't applied it. So here's a 12-year-old boy from the US applying sacred geometry, and they basically haven't done anything with it. So as you can see in all of this, there's a hesitancy to change what we're learning at school. So that's also so for me to say, well, I'm going to rewrite the world's education, I would say that those 5 topics would be the main arms, because the 5-pointed star is like a human. When we have like the Leonardo, the Vitruvian man, you've got 2 legs, 2 arms, and the head. Right. So Vedic maths would be down there with magic squares as the 2 feet. They're the foundation. We have to know our times table. We have to know digital compression, where we add big numbers to single digits, and we have to know magic squares. And from that, we get to the next level, which is the golden mean and the shapes of the atomic structures of the Platonic solids. But then, if I had to leave one book, if I had to leave the planet and leave one topic, it would be this topic here called the art of number. So that the top of the pentacle, I'll show you. I'm just showing it on the screen here. It's called the art of number. So that's and that symbol there that you see is probably the most psychoactive or most powerfully encoded symbol, and you recognize that as the Templar cross.
Right, I was just going to say that actually.
It's actually called the prime number cross, and so when we study the prime numbers, like when we get 12-year-old kids, so once the kids have learned their times table, then they start learning sequences like the binary code 2, 4, 8, 16, and then they learn Fibonacci numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. But perhaps the most powerful sequence are called the prime numbers, and they're all the numbers that can't be divided by 2 or 3 or 4, but they make an exquisite pattern, the cross, the 4th dimensional cross. But the irony is that when you go to university, they tell you that the prime numbers they're a nonsense sequence. Don't go there. Don't study prime numbers. And that's where we're still at today. You know, there has been a witch hunt on the suppression of this knowledge in the 12th century. I don't think they were called Templars. I think they were called the Cathars. But like 1 million Cathars were murdered. Anyone that was wearing that red Templar cross was basically murdered, and they went into hiding.
Go into detail. Can you go more into detail about that cross specifically in terms of its actual significance? The what were called the Templar cross, but you called it something different.
I've done this before, and I might hesitate to go into detail because there's so many different theories. The latest theory now is that it's got to do with the bloodline, like the bloodline of Jesus, that Mary Magdalene had several children, and that Joseph the tin miner, her uncle, took her to Marseille, and the children there became the bloodline of Italy and King Arthur. But, you know, when I start talking like that, I lose a lot of people. So I guess my friend Dan Winter, he's probably more of an authority on the origin of the Templars and the Cathars, like cathedral. The word cathedral may have originated from Cathar, I'm not sure, but he will go deep into the etymology. But again, when I brought Dan Winter out to Australia, he started talking about shape-shifting reptiles, and we would take him to a university here in Lismore, and they would all walk out, and we kept saying, don't talk about the reptiles, just talk about your discoveries with phase-shifting heterodyne molecules, or like he's done a lot of amazing stuff. But his passion is the origin Adam and Eve and all that kind of stuff, and he just loses people. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Right.
I'm not an authority. I think I'm more of an authority on proving to a professor. I like to know. I've been invited to go teach in Africa at the Ghana University, and they want to know what's the subject of my talk, and it's going to be this stuff here, the art of number. So my authority is that I can 100% show that every sacred symbol, like the Templar cross or the six-pointed star, or has a mathematical coding to it, and that any child, and my job is like, I need to show that any 10-year-old child can reproduce that prime number cross, that it's not something too esoteric. So I'm trying to bring down the esoteric, and bring it down to a layman's level. That's why I don't want to talk about the Templar cross, because I've only got, I get into trouble when I talk about all this stuff.
Right.
And,
well, what about this one? You mentioned the Buddhists use the mathematics, and I believe that's called a yantra, correct? The symbol for the. Can you go into a little bit detail about that and what it represents, what it means?
My research with the yantra was that, like 30 years ago, when I was teaching mandalas in Byron Bay, no one even knew the word sacred geometry then, and mandala was still an Indian word, but my understanding is that the mandala is a three-dimensional sphere, like a soccer ball. And that when you shine a light on a construct, it makes a shadow, could make a shadow like a six-pointed star or hexagon. So the yantra, what we call a mandala, when we say, oh, isn't that a beautiful mandala, that drawing, that's actually a yantra. And the yantra means a machine or a device. It's a tool to make the invisible visible. So when we're drawing what we call a mandala, it's actually a yantra, or power art, and that's what helps us to perceive a three-dimensional, four-dimensional reality. So the mandala is really like a soccer ball shape. So when we look at the Sri Yantra, the 9 interlacing triangles, that's a yantra. But if you were in India in a temple, they don't worship the 9 interlacing triangles in the diagram. That's just the yantra. They're actually worshipping a 9-tiered mountain. They call it Mount Meru. It's actually a three-dimensional construct with 9 layers and 9 sides, like a mountain. And so that's the mandala, because the word mond means the world. It's trying to understand the universe through sacred shape and pattern.
What does 9 represent in the yantra? You said there were 9 different mounds. Yeah, what does each 9 represent?
I was the first person to write a book on the number 9. I've got a book called The Magic of 9. Again, I wrote it 15 years ago. No one really understood it, but I believe that 9 is the number. I mean, they all say it's about completion, but I see it as a number of creation, like the atoms of creation. But it's only valid in a base 10 system, because that's the other thing. We can't attribute everything to number 9, because we're not just in base 10. We use all bases. Base 12, base 2 is what allows us to talk right now. The 0 and 1 on-off switch. Base 2 is what an alien would use to communicate galactically. So base 2 binary zeros and ones is probably more powerful than our base 10. But my whole life has all been about a journey with studying the number 9, because we're in a base 10 system. Yeah, so I could talk all day about number 9. The more I research, the more the number 9 just keeps coming up all the time. So you could spend a lifetime alone just studying the nature of number 9. And now currently there's many other authors now are releasing books on the number 9. And even when I read their books, I keep discovering new stuff. It's so vast.
Do you think that there is a correct base number, as we call them? Like, is there a correct universal one that isn't necessarily arbitrary in the sense that it's a man-made thing, but rather a natural base system?
Yeah, I would say that like we need base 10. Base 10, we'll call it Earth mathematics. We need base 10 when we're doing Vedic maths in our head. We need to understand 10, 100,000, the decimal place system. And I used to think that base 10 was just an Earth-based system, because I worship base 12. I thought base 12 was the key, that if you wanted to study Stonehenge or the pyramids or sacred sites and grids around the Earth, everything was written in base 12, which is fine. But the more I research, this is why I want to become a researcher, the more I research is that base 10 is just as important as base 10 as 12. So I've had to continually redefine my understanding of all these bases. And base 2, base 10, base 12, they're all powerful. So I can't say which one is better, but it's really important. So I've spent years just doing everything I know, all the codes that I've worked on. I've tried to do it in base 3 and base 4 and base 5. It's called clock mathematics. When we talk about base 10, like we're in a base 10 system, right? But really, it's a 0 with the numbers 1 to 9. So that number 9 crops up. It's the numbers from 1 to 9. But we need this kind of negative space, this 0 point. We need a 0 and 9 numbers, but we call it 10. It sounds like a contradiction. So if you're looking at a clock in maths, it's called modulus, and this has been shut down. I'll tell you why they've shut this down. But base 10 is actually a circle with from 0, 1 to 9, and that's just like a stargate. It opens up all the symmetry. If you just stick to 1 to 10, you don't see the pattern, but as soon as you put the 0 in there, suddenly all the atoms rearrange and show themselves as in an internal symmetry that's hidden. So I could take anything like the Fibonacci sequence, binary sequence, and just examine it in terms of 9, and a whole universe of information will open up. So we call that digital compression. Base 9, when we talk about the 9 numbers, we reduce all the big numbers. Like if you take the number 144, that's 3 digits. If we add the digits, it's 1 plus 4 plus 4 is 9. The hard way to do it was that if you took a number like, give me a teen number or something like 17. So we know that 17 is 1 plus 7 is 8, but the other way to get the digital compression of 17 is to take away 9. So if I took 9 from 17, I end up with 8. So if you had a number like 34, if you took 9 from 34 and then took it, if you kept taking 999 off 34, you're going to end up with a remainder. And that's called the modulus maps. That ring of 0 and 9 numbers opens up all the symmetry. So I've spent my whole life with one thing called digital compression, and it's got many other names, digital roots, and a lot of authors now are talking about it. Marco Rodin is famous for talking about digital compression. He did a lot of amazing work, and I found that a lot of my work that I've done is parallel to Marco Rodin's, and yet I haven't even met him yet.
Oh, yeah.
He does vortex-based maths. They're basically saying when you create a torus and you map 3 systems into it, you map the binary system, you map the Fibonacci sequence, and also that kind of concept of the negative 0, the empty space. There's a 369 code that Tesla talked about. So they worked out that if you use some intelligent coding based on the numbers of nature and plug it into a torus, that somehow more energy came out of the torus than what we put in. And we call it free 0 point energy or vortex energy.
Right.
And they're not the right words for it, but that's why people are researching, is like, how come we can get more energy out than in? And all we did was use a mathematical code.
Right.
So
let me ask you a question. There's something that it's kind of it's in my mind ever since you said it. You said when you add 0 to a number series, it basically opens up a type of portal. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more and how that 0 really alters the sequence of digits?
It's a mystery. It's because the 0 is the nothing, but yet it's the everything. In India, they call it the bindu.
Okay.
So if we had to attribute numbers, if we had to attribute names to numbers, I mean, 0 could be a thing like the source or God or unity and everything. So it's a mystery, because how can nothing make something work? You know, it's a mystery. It's probably the center of the torus. So I have a torus here. So here's a and this is called a tube torus donut, but as the suction is going towards the center, we call that implosion.
Right.
And it looks like our number, the 0. So it's not actually nothing. It's actually a point where everything gets sucked in, and on the other side is explosion, not the implosion. So now everything's getting sucked out. So the 0 is kind of like a wormhole, perhaps, that bridges all the information in the universe. It's hard to explain.
No, that makes
Uh,
perfect sense actually, because it
yeah.
even looks like it just geometrically. It looks like a zero, and it's kind of a point of beginning, like you mentioned, the bindu before
Yes.
creation, where everything kind of is at a state of equilibrium or harmony, and then it explodes back out the other side, and then starts recreating the numbers in sequence.
Oh, that's
So
well said. Thank you. Yeah, very good.
I'll
Yeah.
take it. I'll take it.
And again, there's whole authors now writing books just on the nature of zero because no one,
Right.
we never really thought about it. And I read this stuff. So that's when I say I want to become a researcher, I just want to have lots of cups of tea. I live in a rainforest. I just want to read all this stuff. And then from this esoteric stuff, I want to make it explainable to a 10-year-old. So my job is to take all this stuff and just say, how can I make a worksheet out of this so that a 10-year-old can really get excited about mathematics? Because they're the future designers, the future leaders. That's how I see it.
Right. Let me ask
So
you this.
0, 9,
Jain,
in fact, 0 and 9 are almost equated to each other. In all these books I'm reading, there's no difference between 0 and 9 now. And I'm scratching my head saying, why are they doing that? It's like, but it makes sense as you read the story. Yeah.
what about this? So Jain108. We got
Okay.
before we started the interview, we talked a little bit about the number 108, and that is your that is in part your name. So go into detail about 108. Why 108?
Okay, what happened was when before I got into, I've always been teaching the golden mean, but suddenly, like if I want to get into a school, you can't go talking about golden mean. So if you're a maths teacher, I can get your attention by saying, look, we can multiply really quickly in our head like this, and the Indians done it. So I've got your attention, and I can. So I started doing Vedic maths in schools, and that opened up the doors. So then I got invited to India. I met some top mathematicians there, and they took me to Hyderabad. There was a conference of like 200 mathematicians, and they'd never heard about. They all know that 108 is their sacred number. So these are the top mathematicians in the world, like IBM in America, right? And I gave a PowerPoint there. I only had 1 hour. I had to go through a lot of high security, military. I gave a 1 hour lecture on why the origin of Shri 108, I called it. Like, why is 108 sacred? They didn't know. And yet they could calculate at the speed of light. And so I gave a lecture showing that if you take the Fibonacci numbers, like I just assume most people know the Fibonacci numbers. You can put it on your screen. 1 plus 1. Well, starting from the binary 0, 1. If 0 is the beginning and then the next entity is 1, we keep adding the number before. 0 and 1 make 1. So now we've got 0, 1, 1, and it keeps going 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. By the time we get to 13, again, we have to take 9 from that, back to that digital compression. So 9 from 13 is 4. So instead of writing 13, I write 4. And the next number, which is 21, really is 3. So what we're looking for in mathematics is called repeatability, which means here's an infinite additive code called Fibonacci sequence. We really don't know what infinity is. It could be 0, but it's going to an infinity, the micro, macro. So my only way of understanding infinite series is to do this thing called take away 9 and you get a single digit. So when we take away 9 from all the Fibonacci numbers, which is the universe to me, we end up with a 24 repeating sequence. I'll see if I can remember. It goes 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Oh no, I won't go through it. It's too long. But there's a pattern in it based on the number 9. So I started teaching to these mathematicians that if you digitally squeeze the Fibonacci sequence, which they didn't even really think anything about, they're not excited about sacred geometry, so they didn't really even know what that is, but because that's my passion. But when you squeeze the Fibonacci code down to single digits, you got 24 numbers, and those 24 numbers are actually 2 rows of 12, and every pair of numbers in the 2 rows of 12 add up to 99999. So the code is really 12 lots of 9, and as you know, 12 nines are 108. So I started showing that somehow this Shri 108, you've got to remember that in India, there's 1 billion people that as soon as they hear the word 108, they put their hands together as if you're mentioning Buddha or Jesus.
Right.
And so there's 100 billion people mindlessly worshipping 108, and no one had ever explained the mathematical origin of why 108. Right. So I was the first person in the world to do that. Not only because I was just doing the research with number 9, and then I got my first standing ovation. I've never had a standing ovation, and it was from a very amazing group of people who I've stayed in contact with. Because somehow I connected 108 to the living mathematics of nature, saying that the mathematics in our cells, in pine cones, and the distances of the planets from the sun is encoded or encoded in the numerical vibration of 108. And that suddenly made them feel, oh, we have a tangible connection now to 108, which is life, which is flowers. And they were just bowled over by that. And so then what happened was I started getting letters. So I'm back home now, and then I got letters. This is about 10 years ago. So I started receiving letters in those days. And they wrote my name as Jain108. I was just Jain.
Right.
So to answer your question, the mail that I received, snail mail that I received, I've kept them. They had the name Jain108 on it. I thought, oh, that's nice, because if you called yourself Joe 108, it would sound egotistical, because 108 means Shri or respected sir.
Right.
It's trying to say that you're important, and I wasn't trying to say that I'm important. That was an honest story about how it came, and somehow it stuck.
Well, it's a good name, so stick with it. I think it's a great name.
Thank you. And I needed to explain that I didn't make that up. It just actually happened. And
well, let's go back to this. We talked a little bit about the planets. You mentioned that you can actually find ratios, or somehow the 108 is in the planets or proportioned in the planets somehow. Can you go into a little bit of detail about that?
Okay, before we get to planets, I'll just say that they just had a TV series here from London. Some amazing maths professors showed the growth of the Nautilus shell. As we know, that the Nautilus shell keeps growing every year, creates new chambers, and as scientists, they started measuring the volume of each little chambered shell, and it increased at the rate of 1.08. It was like minute amounts. So this number 1.08 isn't 108, but in the world of harmonics, in harmonic maths, which is another thing like digital compression, firstly, if a number adds up to 9, it's a harmonic. So the number 216, which is 6 cubed, 6 times 6 times 6, the answer is 216. If you add the digits, it's 9. So we can say 216 is harmonic. But other harmonic numbers, it could be 0.0216, or it could be 2.16. So we remove the zeros, and we remove any decimal points, and we're looking at fundamental digits. Now, they call this, mathematicians won't accept this thing, what I just explained. They say, oh, that's just mere numerology. But it's actually one of the keys to the highest level of mathematics I know. Harmonic maths was developed by Bruce Cathy. Bruce Cathy was a New Zealand pilot who flew. I haven't avoided your question about the planets. I'm coming to it.
It's okay.
But Bruce Cathy is one of my heroes. He just died, but he was flying in New Zealand, and he saw a craft just fly like a lightning bolt across the sky. And over the years, he started plotting those tracks where he'd noticed, as a commercial air pilot, he started tracking on a three-dimensional globe what would happen, where does this sighting continue. And he did a bit of research, and he found that he developed the grid around the planet. So he's the father of what we call, when we talk about ley lines around the planet. And I've read all his books, which all got suppressed, but I've studied his books on harmonics, which is pretty amazing. It's the future in maths. It's real alien type maths. It's three-dimensional geometry, where we're more studying a flat geometry. Well, he's studying the real Earth geometries, and he's the one that's saying that the number 1.08 in the Nautilus shell growth is really a harmonic of 108. And that number 108 came up in all his grids, as did pi and phi. So all these, what we call anointed numbers, are in the grid of the planet. So if you're an alien and you're looking for intelligent life, and you came to planet Earth and you saw that a temple was built on a nodal point at one of these crosses of the ley lines, you would say, oh, there must be an intelligent civilization. But if you were flying around an unknown planet and didn't see any sacred sites or temples at nodal geometric points, you would just fly away saying they're sub-intelligent. And so back to the planets, is that all I know about the planets is that the distance. This was Kepler's work in the 16th century. Kepler, Johannes Kepler, whose work's been shut down. So the whole world's studying Newton, but we really should be studying Johannes Kepler. That was what the Catholics did. I'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, he was saying that all the planets, the orbits of the planets, were the nesting of the 5 platonic solids. Can I just quickly grab the shape to show you?
Absolutely, please do.
Got it here. So this is like 400 years ago. I'll try and hold it still, but on the outside you can see the red shape. That's the dodecahedron, and it's really made of 5 cubes. So now I'm holding some yellow cubes, some yellow sticks there. These are Zoom tools from where are they from? Somewhere in America, Boulder, Colorado. So I taught him Boulder. And I met the Zoom tool people. So I'm wanting to become a distributor for these. But see the cube that I'm holding, the yellow sticks?
Oh yeah.
So that could be the path of like Uranus. And then if you hold the green sticks in here, there's a tetrahedron. I'm touching some green sticks, which is a triangular based pyramid. That could be the path of Venus, and then the orbit of Venus. And if you go further in, he found that the orbits of the planets were the nesting of the 5 platonic solids. Just while I'm talking about platonic solids, before we started the interview, I just want to make one point really clear, is that all this stuff that we're talking about at one point has a lineage from way back to the Greeks 2,000 years ago. And in your research, it's probably way back to the Egyptian pharaohs. They had all this knowledge, and somehow they came to the Greeks. Anyway, so the mathematics that you and I learnt at what we call high school when we're 17, 18 years old, all that maths has a Greek tradition. But something happened 100 years ago, is that someone decided to take out all the beautiful stuff that made mathematics a sacred science. Someone decided in Australia here, someone decided to take out everything to do with these 5 platonic solids. Someone took out all the Fibonacci sequence, all the magic squares, and even the Vedic maths. They can't even teach Vedic maths in India. I know all the teachers there. The teachers say now students don't want to learn Vedic maths, they want to learn British maths. Anyway, so what happened was I was teaching all this platonic solids here in Byron Bay, and then I got a lot of work in the next state called Queensland. So I went to Queensland. I lived there for a year because there was a lot of work. And then one day I got a phone call saying I'm forbidden. I'm being banned to teach in Queensland. So I had to come back to this area. But then I decided to challenge, like, by whose authority? Why is it I can't teach sacred geometry at school? So then I'm sort of upset, and I drove all the way to Brisbane to the head office to meet the decision makers, the people who write the curriculum, actually. And I found out that the people who write the curriculum are fundamental Christians in Brisbane, a group of well-dressed men in suits who decided to control our curriculum, and anything that's not Christian is deleted. So you can see why there's a big unschooling movement in Australia now. There's a big homeschooling movement because a lot of kids, they study mathematics and there's no connection to it. They shut down. So we can't blame society going through this huge unschooling movement at the moment.
It's
so my job here,
it's interesting. I just want to interject on that because it's interesting you say that, because I don't know how much you know about my formal academia. I actually was a math major, and I was very close to getting my bachelor's in science, and I dropped out of it because of that reason. Exactly what you said is just because the context in which they teach it. I was up there in differential equations, linear algebra, and it's not that they don't give application to how these technologies, or rather these sciences, will work, but it was kind of like you can't really put it into an everyday context or integrate it into a life science, so it's completely devoid of that element, just like you mentioned. So I agree with you.
So that's interesting. And to me, all mathematics is sacred. So everything you learn at uni is sacred. And it's just that most children, because I have a daughter that's Asperger's, and or let's just say highly dyslexic, and she would cry every time she had to do a homework at school. We would do a maths homework, she would just break down and cry. She couldn't do it. So about 10 years ago, I'm trying to understand the mind of a child, my own child. And I realize that 70% of children I've met are highly visual. So if we can learn all these differential equations, all this stuff with in conjunction with all this beautiful stuff that we're talking about, that it would create a higher consciousness.
Absolutely.
So it's not that we're against what they're teaching, it's what they've taken out. So we're not even being radical here. We're only trying to put back only what was taken out. It's our legacy. It was our legacy to the ancient knowledge, and it's gone. And I'm really upset about that. But somehow I thought, well, why don't I use this as a controversy? You know, not to bring attention to myself, but the fact that I was banned to teach this is kind of like a springboard for me to go deeper into this, like, question what's going on here, like, and by whose authority. So, as you know, Buckminster Fuller, our mentor, his thing was, don't fight the system, go out and create a new model. So that's where we're at. So this has been a wonderful, being banned for me made me ask a lot of questions and do more research, but now I want to create a new model. So that's why when we started this talk, I said I'm in Singapore now. I've just created a new school. It's registered through the Ministry of Education. It took a long time. It took 4 months to get approval. Like, who am I? I don't even have credentials like you. At least you went to university, right? I don't have any credentials. I could be a maths genius, but I haven't gone through the formal channel. So it took us 4 months just for me to get approved because I'm not formal.
Right. Well, I don't think the formal is that important, because I know just from experience there's definitely many geniuses that'll either drop out of conventional schooling, and there's also a lot that go through conventional schooling, have credentials galore, and they're not worth their salt. So it's not credentials. They don't mean much, so that I don't think is a deciding factor. I think most people who are innovative and who have created this system generally didn't have credentials when you look back at it historically.
See, if you're in an Asian culture like Singapore, I'm really enjoying Singapore because it's an international destination. I meet people from all over the world there, but it's kind of like we don't actually have to have their approval, but it helps when you're trying to set up new structures that the existing structure has given you a little tick to say, yeah, okay, you can teach this. Anyway, so now we've got to start, and so now we're going for a sponsorship. So we're looking for like $200,000-300,000 to inject into the curriculum so that we can make this available to anyone in the remotest part, people living out in deserts. So that's how sacred geometry will become global. And I'll always be teaching. I always love the direct contact with children, but if I want to reach a bigger market, I need to go through the internet.
I think Singapore is an amazing place. I've been there before, so I think that's a good place to start that. But let me ask you this on Singapore, which is next to India. This is a question I wanted to ask you. I've heard when I was in India, I've been to India twice, and I heard that there was actually like a Brahmin sect of yogis that were known to be extremely advanced mathematicians. Did you ever hear anything about that in India?
No, like living today, alive.
Living today. It's like this very, not a very secluded, well, not secluded, but they're a very tight-knit sect of yogis who are basically meditators, follow the yogic science, but in conjunction, their speciality is actually mathematics. And I was supposed to meet some of them, but I could never get a hold of them. So,
see, now you know why I want to become a reacher. I want to know who they are. I want to study with them.
I can't even remember their name off the top of my head. It just reminded me.
Anything, let me know. Send me a few keywords. But I believe that when we're ready, you magnetize by the law of attraction and magnetism. When you're ready, you start meeting all these people. Like the fact that you just mentioned it now, you've just planted a seed in my consciousness that right now there's amazing people on the planet. But I know that that's why I meditate every morning. If I sit every morning, I just become empty, and then I know what I have to do. Like today, I focus in on you because I said today this is important. I'm connecting to. It's amazing. We can just sit here and we're talking to people around the world.
It is.
So we have to get focused though, because it's a very powerful thing. We need to be absolutely focused, but I trust that everything that I need to know will come to me. That's like kind of my mantra is just giving gratitude. I live in a beautiful rainforest. I've got rich parents. They gave me a home. So I've got no excuse. I don't have to struggle. My thing is I've just got to keep doing the work, get my work. So I work really hard, but my job is to just teach my passion and get it to children. And And I'm not
Nice.
fulfilled yet. I feel like I'm only just starting my journey. You know,
Still on the journey, right?
I'm nearly 60 years old now, and I've been doing this for 30 years nonstop, every day, living and breathing it. And it's growing. Like 20 years ago, no one knew what sacred geometry meant.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Can you go back to harmonic mathematics? You briefly touched up on that with Bruce Cathy. Can you go into a little bit of what harmonic mathematics is and kind of give us some examples of that?
So Bruce Cathy was the one who's made renowned the number 144. Like when people hear the number 144, they think of the speed of light constant.
Hmm.
It's really 144,000 minutes of arc per second. So someone divided the Earth like into a soccer ball, or he did, and we want to know, like, we divided. There's 360 degrees in a circle, and then in every degree there's a 60 minutes, and in every minute there's 60 seconds.
Hmm.
So that's like 360 times 60 times 60 again.
Hmm.
See, that's the Babylonian base. So we were talking about base 2, base 10, base 12. Or another one that the Egyptians, the Babylonians used was base 60, because base 60 contained many factors, like all the numbers that could be divided into 60 were like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, everything. That's why they chose it. So what was the question about Bruce Cathy's harmonics?
About the harmonic mathematics, if you could give us an example about that and go into a little detail.
So every time we look at our watch on our hand, but that's actually a memory of Babylonian sexagesimal, means 60, base 60 system, and so the number that's critical in the Earth grid is 144, what they call grid seconds of arc per minute. So the Earth is traveling through space at a harmonic that has got to do with the harmonic of the number 144. Which is what the speed of light is. The speed of light is related to this number. So what Bruce Cathy did was he took these anointed numbers like 144, and he looked at their reciprocals. So 144 is a macro. So what's the micro of that? So we make it a fraction. So if you had your calculator, I don't have it right here, but if you have your calculator and said what's 1 divided by the number 144, you would end up with a number. I'm just doing this off my head. I think it's 0.00694444. I'll repeat that. It's 0.00694444. But then he'll round it off and says, "Oh, it's 0.0." Is it 2 O's or 1 0? Is it point zero?
I did 1 divided by 1.44, and it gives me 0.69, and then fours, just basically 6 fours in a row.
Yeah, so it's 0.0695, right? So he rounds off all the fours to a 5. So he wrote a whole book just on that called the harmonic 695. So how did he get 695? Because you delete the decimal and you delete all the zeros, because we're only interested in those entities that are the whole number 695. Now this contradicts everything we know in modern mathematics. How can you take the reciprocal of light, and he would call that the gravity constant. So in his research, somehow 695 had to do with everything opposite to light. Whatever light is to you,
right,
that was 144 harmonic. But now the opposite of light, let's call it gravity, has to do with 695. So he would find things in nature that was 6.95, and the amount of information that he put together is mind-boggling. And it was all based on looking at reciprocals, which is another whole. Like n, if a number is called n, the reciprocal is 1 on n. So n times its reciprocal is 1. So somehow this whole science of numbers and their reciprocals is all about unity consciousness. So it makes sense. But he went down the rabbit hole, and he with his harmonic maths of 144, he could calculate when the next atom bomb could be dropped. So he's the one that alerted the world and said, "Don't believe the authorities, what they're telling you. They're trying to create fear. They want you to think that there's a nuclear war going to happen." And he said that there's no such thing as a nuclear war, because you can't just drop a bomb. When they dropped the bomb at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, he studied the maths of the Earth grid around it, and he said that you can only drop a bomb. Bombs do detonate, but they can only detonate at a certain time and at a certain site. So I'm going to show you another thing. This is what Buckminster Fuller put together. This is called the rhombic triicontohedron. So that point there is a nodal point here. I'm touching. It's like the ley lines around the planet. So let's say if that's pyramid in Egypt, this could be Stonehenge. This could be Uluru in Australia. These are all the sacred sites. So he's saying that when they drop a bomb, if this is Nagasaki, it was exactly above at the zenith. They're flying above. Before they dropped the bomb, they had to circle Nagasaki for a long time because it had to be at a critical second. It was a critical moment when all the trigonometry had to line up with the north and all the angles had to be right. So the geometry and the time, and that's when the bomb could go off. So what he was teaching was that you can't just drop a bomb and it's a nuclear detonator. It doesn't happen. It has to be at the right time, right place on the grid. And they don't want you to teach. They don't want you to know that because they want you to think that the world is geared towards a nuclear warfare, that each side's going to bomb each other, keep everyone in subservience and fear. But sacred geometry of Bruce Cathy is teaching that it's an Atlantean science based on reciprocals, that there's only certain moments when energy can detonate. And anyway, so that
you mentioned something interesting which really caught my attention because I've thought about this a lot myself, about gravity being the reciprocal of light.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Or was that just...
Again, I'm not a physicist, so I'm only interested in the trigonometry of all of that. I mean, I've read all his books many times, and I'm still, what I'm doing, I can't comment on the physics.
Okay.
It's like a torus, there's an in and an out. Nassim Haramein, when he's talking, he says there's only two things. There's no such thing as north, south, east, and west. There's an in and there's an out. That's it. Implosion, explosion. So maybe gravity and light are a pair on the torus or something. That one's a black hole and the other is a white hole. That's all I can say. Well, he's saying that everything is a torus. A proton is a torus. The Earth is a torus. Our eyes, the iris of our eye is a torus. Every blood cells, the flattened red platelets, they're all tori. And so that's why if I travel around the world, we'll probably meet each other because I'm coming to teach in San Francisco.
Okay.
But if I had to travel, I'll travel with the torus. I'll travel with this shape here.
Nice.
That's the cube octahedron. The cube octahedron is this shape here. So the beauty of the cube octahedron is that when under compression, when we squeeze this shape of 6 squares and 8 triangles, when we squeeze it, it becomes an icosa. That's an icosahedron. I squeeze again, it becomes the octahedron, which is like atomic structure of crystals. But if you squeeze again, you end up with like a pyramid. You get it's not the Egyptian pyramid because it's all 60-degree angles. But if I squeeze this again, one more compression, the basic compression, everything goes back to the tetrahedron. So this is the basic building block of all atomic structure. So there's a few toys that I would travel with as I go around the world. But this is my most exciting one at the moment, is this one here, because the cube octahedron, it's a cube. Imagine this was a cube, a piece of potato, and I sliced the 8 corners off this, right? If I just slice the 8 corners of the cube. So the harmonics on this are all ringing at the rate of 1.2. It's 1.414. It's called root 2. So root 2 means cubic, and there's nothing wrong with the cube, but we're more interested in the pentacle mathematics. So this shape here, it's all based on root 5. Like, to get the connection to the 108 and the golden mean is that we want the mathematics of a double square, not just the one square or one cube. We want the double cube, which is Thor's hammer. When you look at the power, the symbolism of Thor's hammer is that it has the right harmonics. And the harmonics of Thor's hammer is this shape here. It's called this is the shape that Buckminster Fuller designed the Earth grid on. And it's in every diamond here. So when we look at this diamond, so you can see this diamond here, right? So there's a short axis and there's a long axis. So instead of saying this is 1 and this is 1.618, that's the golden mean, most people understand it if I say if this is 8, this is 13. The ratio of 8 to 13 is what we have in pine cones. Like, so when we look at the counter-rotating field of a pine cone, we say there's 8 spirals going clockwise and 13 the other way. So that's our best definition of sacred geometry. We just go 8, 13, which is pine cone, or we could say 21, 34, which is for the sunflower. So all the mathematics of nature is embedded in this grid. So these diamonds here are in the ratio 8 to 13, and there's 30 of them. So this has got 30 faces, 30 golden diamonds. It's got 32 nodal points where all the temples on the earth are. And I think it's got 60 sticks, 60, which is back to that Babylonian base 60. So this is my most amazing shape at the moment that I talk a lot about. It's the earth grid. Even if I go, imagine, can you see where my finger is in the middle? That's the center of the sphere. So if the center of the sphere is 13 units, from there to a nodal point, the radius of that sphere is 13. That means the sticks are all 8. So if the edges of the shape are in a harmonic proportion to the radius of the sphere, this makes it a very sacred shape. And when you start spinning it at a critical time with a critical light, this whole shape actually goes invisible. I've actually can prove and show that the Philadelphia experiments, all that's test for invisibility, has got to do with the phi ratio. I'm convinced of that, and that's why I just want to research. There's so many amazing ideas in my brain. I just want to become a hermit and retreat. When I hook up with those Indian mathematicians you've been talking about,
I'll try to get the name of them. I was there. I was there a few months back, and I was staying actually with a yogi friend of mine. And when one of his disciples came by, then him and I started kind of just briefly, not as even in depth as you and I are talking about, but anybody who always brings up mathematics that's spiritual, I'm interested in, just because my personal interest have always been kind of those two, trying to sync those two worlds together. And he had told me that there was a sect in India somewhere, and they're not even well known even in India, but if you're kind of in part of a spiritual community and you're really into that stuff, then you've heard about them, but they don't let a lot of outsiders in. And I try to set up a date.
Advaita. I get a lot of emails saying you've got to study this group in India called the Advaita. They don't Advaita. There's some ancient group that I have been referred to, but not enough information to get me.
Are they the ones that the Vedantic?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah,
yes.
I've read a lot of scriptures from them, actually. A lot of scriptures. I don't think I've ever met one, but I've read a lot of their scriptures. I can send you when we get off.
Yeah, if you can send me any, because it could be a trigger. Well, you could be the trigger for my next, depth of knowledge and
revelation.
Yeah, and just like I'd just like to, when I do introductory lectures on sacred geometry, I just want to show I'm coming up to this shape. I just want to show why this shape is important. But remember the Earth grid, remember this shape here. We'll call that the sphere, the original grid around the planet, right? At one point we were one sphere. If sacred geometry means we're trying to remember who we are, we have to go back to the moment when father, mother came together out of love and contributed 23 chromosomes that give us, brown eyes, black hair. At one moment we were like a sphere, right? Here's a sphere. But this shape here, we're going to talk about the sphere in a minute, but I'm just going to break this up. This is the Earth grid. That's the 30 diamonds. See these diamonds? That's the grid I just showed you. I pulled out, it's made up of these, so that's the 813. So each diamond here is 813, but they're rhomboids.
Okay.
They're rhombic pyramids, and this is a really advanced knowledge. So at one moment you're looking at a hexagon. See the 6? See the 6 there? There's 3 of them, 3 rhomboids, and they're based on the golden mean, and they make a hexagon, the 6 sides. But that if I twist it, so there it is there, it's from there. But if I do a shift, now if I look at this point here, if you just look at that point there, can you see like a starfish? There's 5, 1, 2, 3, 5. Yeah. So there's the 5, and just with a little tilt, you'll suddenly see a 6. Can you see a cube there?
Yeah.
So this is what DNA does. The penta, hexa, the shift from 5 to 6 is a very deep inquiry, and it's all embedded in this shape here, and it just clicks. So So this is a magnetic toy that I could just pull it apart like that, and it's all magnetic, and it all just clicks. So my job is to get all these sacred geometry toys available to children. So at the beginning we were one sphere, and then the one divided into two. That was our separation from God.
Mm-hmm.
The two represents duality, separation. But then mitosis begins, and then the two becomes four. So then you ask yourself, what did four spheres look like? So if you imagine you've got four oranges in front of you. I might go grab four oranges. So if you've got four oranges, you could say put them together as like a square or something.
Mm-hmm.
But nature doesn't do that. When nature compresses, they would have like three in a triangle. They would have like three in a triangle like this,
mm-hmm.
and then you sit one on top. So when you do that, so if you join the four centers of the four spheres now, you end up with a shape called the tetrahedron. I don't have it in front of me. Let me see. Yeah, so here's one of them. So this is what we look like. So sacred geometry is saying that at the first minute of your cosmogenesis, your beginnings of life, you were this shape. You were a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And the element for this was fire. It was like, this is the shape of like a buckwheat seed, or this is nature's best shape.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and then when what happens is that when the four cells divided into 8, this is the binary code, we looked like this. So 8 cells. So if you had 8 oranges now, this is how they would stack. And we have to thank technology for inventing the microscope, the tunneling microscope, to give us as scientists the verification of that we were these geometries. So in fact we became all the 5 platonic solids.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of this cubic 8 spheres, this is your 8, the memory of your 8 original cells. If you were to join, when I work with kids, I get them to visualize a magic spider is joining the 8 centers of the 8 spheres. So this is what you get. So inside of the cube, this is actually a cube. I can sit it flat on my hand, and you can see the X shape there.
Yeah.
It's cube. Now this is interesting. So not only is this biologically what we looked like, this it's called the star tetrahedron. It's 2 tetrahedrons. There's one going up, and it's been interdigitated or interpenetrated by another one. And if you join the 8 corners, it makes the cube.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not only what we looked like, this is also the atomic structure of silicon chip quartz, which is what makes up the computer. So that means we have this weird connection to the biology of our memory, who we are, and also to the digital age.
Uh-huh.
Because what stores the memory in your computer right now, as we're speaking, the substance of creation that allows all the memory to be stored, billions and billions of bits of information are stored in this.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that shape stores the memory. Shape is the future language, is a universal language. And that's why we have to teach children visual content. So in that 5-pointed star pentacle, you can't just learn Vedic maths and become great mathematical geniuses.
Right.
You've got to understand the language of nature and shapes and patterns and use them in our inventions. So
let me ask you this. Like mathematical constants, like we talked about phi, the golden ratio, pi, and then there's of course like e, which is a natural logarithm.
Yes.
In your research, what are some of the more like, because those are kind of known natural constants, but then I kind of feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you mentioned another one, which was the 108. Basically, that's kind of like a natural constant in a sense, right?
Yes.
How many more constants like that have you discovered, and what are they?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, can I talk about there's the most important constant in the universe. Like as engineers, the whole world is built on anything to do with curvature and circles and building structures. It's all based on pi. Mm-hmm. Pi is a relationship of, say, to the square and the sphere around it. The circle-square relationship is based on pi. And we know traditionally pi is 3.141. We'll just go just the 3 decimals. Pi is 3.141. But how did they get that? But what I'm leading up to, all my research now is coming to a point that I believe that pi is disharmonic. It's the wrong information. There's a conspiracy going on that NASA are using another value for pi, because I've been receiving some emails from some ex-NASA officials, and they're blatantly confirming to me what I've already discovered, is that pi is not 3.141. The error is in the third decimal, because when they were machining the mooncraft and all that stuff, this is whether or not we even did land on the moon or not. That's another discussion. But they were saying that when they did the machinery, the finest machinery on the planet to do the mooncraft, they had to fudge the value of pi to make things fit perfectly. And the error was in the third decimal. So I believe that the true value of pi is 3.144, going back to that light harmonic 144. And I've written volumes on that. That's why I want to do the research. I'm so convinced now that the ultimate harmonic on the planet is the true value of pi. It's called 3.144605511093144. I can recite it it just goes on and on.
What was that one more time?
I better just get it right, but it's 3.144605511093144. That the first part of it, the first four things is 3.144. That 3.144 actually repeats itself again after about 15 decimals. That's how I memorized it.
Okay.
And somehow the 108, and to get this value of 3.144, it's based on the golden mean. So, in fact, I'm convinced now that when you draw a circle and the square around it, it's all based on the golden mean, which they don't teach at school. I can show you as a mathematician. I'd love to sit down with you, and I teach this in my workshops anyway, that with a bit of Pythagoras' theorem, I can prove to you that we don't even need pi. All we need is the golden mean, what I call phi or you call phi, same thing. I can show that if you put three circles together in the square, if you just got three tangent circles on the line, three circles touching each other, you've opened up all the harmonics of the universe, the Trinity. Everything I know comes back to three. So if I could put three circles side by side and draw one line going through one of the centers, I can show you where the golden mean is in three circles. And that's what opened up all the knowledge. The 3 and the 1. When you divide one circle into 3, the phi ratio appears, and that's how we calculate the true value of pi. And it's an amazing story. Again, the reason why I want to research is that there's so much more information, and I believe that's why all the technology is wrong today. Like when we say we put mobile phones are an expression of global consciousness. We all love our mobile phones, but we're all suffering from radiation, microwaves, because there's some distortion going on with the fundamental harmonics of the creation. It's not right.
Right.
And as soon as we correct 3.141 traditional pi to the true value of pi, we're going to open up all the physics of wormholes, the time bend, all that ancient art of time bending and black hole technology. It's all going to be perfected, and that's when we'll end up in like the what's it called, the Jacksons. Did you grow up on
the Jetsons?
cartoon?
I remember the Jetsons.
Jetsons, yes.
I didn't. I watched reruns. I actually wasn't alive, I think, during the original air, but I do know what they are. Yeah.
I love it. Isn't it funny? When we were children, we grew up watching, cars flying through the cosmos, through the city. But there's some truth in it, and I believe that what's going to open up the gate, so it's a healthy technology, not a manipulated technology. When we can correct the true value of pi, we're in the right direction, and that's why they deleted this stuff. You can see now, like when you follow my thread, the reason why they deleted the golden mean out of our curriculum is so that you'll never ask that question. And that's why the best thing I ever did was to renunciate university and go live with black people for 2 years, because I never got contaminated by I was already brainwashed by the time I was 18. I couldn't take anymore. I literally, I just couldn't study anymore. I had to turn everything off, defrag, because I was Yeah, go on.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned a little bit earlier, and this triggered the number 33 in my mind. You said in three
Yeah.
spheres, if you conglomerate three spheres and you divide even one by three, which kind of yields 3.333 infinitely.
Yeah.
And then, the 33 is a very powerful number.
Mm.
You can find that in the Freemasons, in the Bible, many times in the Bible, actually, and even the Quran, it's there. What is your take or discoveries or revelations about the number 33?
Um, well, it's a good one because I mean, if I could pan around the computer, my whole house is full of files on numbers from floor to ceilings. I've got it's called a harmonic dictionary,
Mm-hmm.
so I could pull out a whole folder. If I went into that room over there, I could pull out a whole folder on any number that you want, 33, 34, 1,010, any number you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to make it all available online once I get the funding. That's why I need the funding.
Mm-hmm.
But the number 33 is anointed. I won't go into all the facts about it, but it's definitely one of those special numbers. I just realized that 33 squared is 1,089, which is 1.08. It's another harmonic. There is a 108 connection.
33 squared.
Is that right? Can you check? 33 squared is 1089, which I just realized it relates to 1.08.
Yeah, it's 1,089.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess
And I didn't know that. I just saw that when you just said 33. I squared it, and I thought, oh. But that's what I'm saying. So every time you get ideas, we put it all down, and then we just put it all out. So,
right.
But yeah, definitely, I would do research on 33. I would do a lot of research on that number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you noticed in the Roman Catholic Church, there's actually a fountain which I've personally seen when I've been to the Vatican, and it's kind of it's relatively well known today, especially if you go online. You can Google search this pine cone statue, which is in the Vatican, and it has the pine cone. You mentioned that a little bit earlier.
It's 5 stories high. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
I always talk about it when I lecture. I've always got a photo. I went there. We've been to the same places, but I was just amazed by it. I was just the size of it. It's just amazing. Yeah.
So that pine cone, then, you did talk about it a little bit, but go ahead and if you can elaborate a little bit about how.
To me, the pine cone, the pine cone would be the ultimate symbol of sacred geometry. The ratio of 8 to 13. It's like the pineal gland, the shape of an egg, of creation, a seed. A pine cone is a seed. So why has nature adopted this specific curvature to create more life? Because that little pine cone is going to become a huge tree. So it's potentially the most ultimate symbol, as well as the sunflower. The pine cone and the sunflower are the two symbols that I would use. I've got a book here. I'm doing a series of stickers right now. Next time, in about a week, I'll have all these online. But I've got it's got some plastic on it. But my friend, I'm getting all this artwork done, and there's different types. So I'm doing a series of large pizza-sized ones, and I just had on my table that I want to do one on this one here. This is one of my book. I've done 9 books on the Book of Phi, on the gold mean. So this is number 6, and I was just curious. Can you see the sunflower pattern there?
Yes, yes.
So that's the 21-34 ratio, and I've kind of highlighted some spirals in there to say there's 21 spirals one way, 34. But the white part of the pattern that you see, just the white, the outline of the sunflower, to me is the most powerful symbol that I know of. Like if we had to have a world flag, let's say we had to have a new flag to represent the United Nations or the world as one, we want a symbol that would represent everyone and everything. So I would submit that 2134 or pine cone. Pine cone's nice, but it's a bit simpler. That one I just showed you, to me, is probably the number one graphic I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I think we should use that as a world flag symbol. But you'll see how beautiful it is. When I'm making it as a sticker, my friend's coming tomorrow. We're doing, he does all the covers of my books. So we're going to work on that one and make it as a decal so that people can put that geometry on the glass and it projects it into your house. As you know, these decals, they're space clearing devices. They're bringing the harmonics into the space. So I'm really excited about. That's why I want to do more research. I I want to stop teaching for a little while so I can spend more time at home just doing the work,
Right.
the things that I want to do, because life gets too busy, and
Right.
our life now is really about time management.
Right.
I'm probably older than you. I'm nearly 60 now, so basically, my life now is like every hour is precious, and
Right.
if I had a spare day, what would I do with it?
Right.
So time's very valuable. It's not money; it's about time
Right.
for me.
I went to
Yeah.
your website and you mentioned something about the Gayatri mantra.
Yes.
Do you want to go into that a little bit and explain what that is and how that is
Yeah, I
formulated?
got into a lot of trouble. I was teaching. When I went to Hyderabad, I said I went to India, and I had that.
Hmm.
I was teaching about Sri 108.
Yeah.
In that time, just before I went to India, I was I was teaching in Kuala Lumpur, and I happened to have the fortune of meeting a head abbot of one of the orders there, the
Hmm.
monastic orders,
Okay.
and we managed to have a lunch together. I had a private 1 hour with this head monk,
Okay.
and he spoke really good English. And I had one burning question to him. I said, I want to know. I knew that. I asked him about the number 108. I forget the question, but he told me something I didn't know. I think I said that the Gayatri mantra has. I was telling him about the number 108,
Okay.
and he lit up. And then he told me something. He said that the Gayatri mantra has 24 syllables as well, and which means it all. I knew that I knew that it all adds up to 108, but it's basically an encodement, a sonic encryption for 24 syllables and the numerology adds up to 108. So he told me something in confidence, and then I went and published that on my website, and I had to retract it. I had to pull it down. He got really upset.
What was it? Can you
I got
share?
no. I got no. Well, that the fact that he told me something in confidence that the the Gayatri mantra was based on 24 syllables, which is no big deal to me. Like I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? It fits in with the Fibonacci sequence, 24 repeating numbers,
Hmm.
and they add up to 108. And he says that's what the Gayatri mantra is. It's made up of 24 syllables.
Right.
And I didn't know that was meant to be like top secret information, but I went and published it, and I had to I lost my connection with my promoters there because I published confidential information. But I didn't
Wow.
realize. I thought that was universal knowledge. Like we should let people know that the Gayatri mantra is the sonic version of the 108 code. Anyway,
Interesting.
yeah, and I had to pull it down, and I'm still friends with them, but I got in a lot of trouble. I didn't even. I was innocent like a child. I didn't know that I revealed something. It's just knowledge, It's no
Right.
big deal. Anyway, so there must be some reason why things like this are kept secret, perhaps.
You mentioned also on your website, I checked out you were talking about celestial geometry. Can you go into that a little bit and explain what that is?
Yeah, on my homepage, I remember putting my friend from the States, Jonathan Quinton.
Hmm.
Probably know he works with Nassim. He stays anyway. My friend Jonathan stayed here for a few months, and he showed me a video clip. I don't know who put it out. Could have been someone like Dummenher, some cosmic group, and they showed that the path of Jupiter and Saturn, as Jupiter and Saturn are going around the Sun,
Hmm.
they have a 60-year cycle,
Okay.
which is back to the Babylonian cycle, 60 seconds to the minute.
Hmm.
So, and even in the Chinese New Year, today's Chinese New Year, I believe, there's 1 billion people on the planet celebrating Chinese New Year.
Hmm.
It's the first full moon of every February. They also have 60-year cycles, like when you go through rooster,
Right.
monkey, and all that. It's a 60-year cycle, apparently. Anyway, so this 60-year cycle has to do with Saturn takes roughly 30 years to go around the sun.
Right.
So 2 cycles of Saturn is 60 years, right?
Hmm.
And in that time of 60 years, 2 cycles of Saturn, Jupiter does, I think Jupiter takes 10 years. Is that, no, 12 years to, yeah, Jupiter takes 1 year to go through every sign,
Hmm.
like Aries, Taurus, Gemini. So Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the sun. So how many times does 12 go into 60? We know it's 5. So 5 cycles of Jupiter is equivalent to 2 cycles of Saturn.
Hmm.
And this animation, I wish I could, I don't know if it's still working on my website, but it'll show you. But it shows that as Jupiter does 2 cycles, and as Saturn does 2 cycles this way and Jupiter does 5,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that there's a 5-pointed star appears. That
Interesting. Very
so
interesting.
the relationship between
Hmm.
Jupiter and Saturn over I did it over a 60-year cycle is a 5-pointed star pentagram in the sky,
Hmm.
and then they changed it, and then they did another modification, and they said that Saturn and Jupiter conjunct every 20 years. So every 20 years, Saturn and Jupiter come together. And we know that as a fact. What's his name? Um, John Lennon. John Lennon was born when he had Saturn and Jupiter conjunct.
Mm-hmm.
And so 20 years goes by, which means Saturn and Jupiter have done a dance and they come back to the same point in the sky. And that's when he reaches fame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the next 20 years, John Lennon gets shot. And so his whole life was governed from birth to death, from birth, fame, and death. His whole life was governed by the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions.
Hmm.
And then, so when you look at the conjunctions, and we're looking at every 20 years or 10 years is when they come together. They're either conjunct or opposite each other,
Mm-hmm.
exactly opposite. So if you look at the 10-year cycles or 20, it makes a hexagon in the sky.
Interesting.
And it's really hard to explain without the animation. That's why we need the animations. And I'm hoping it's still working. When you played celestialgeometry.exe, did it play?
Well,
Did
I
you
just
get
actually saw it just mentioned on your website.
Yeah.
And what you're describing, I don't know if it's the same guy you're describing, but I actually saw a website sometime back a year or two ago that he had done outlines of how those orbits actually played on each other, and it did create
Yes.
certain geometric patterns, specifically like hexagrams or whatever it was. So I
Yes.
think we may be talking about the same person. I'm not sure, but
This one had no one talking, explaining. It was just someone. There was a voice in the background.
Mhm.
It was a very mysterious. It appeared like 10 years ago.
okay.
It was the first time I saw real cosmic animation
Hmm.
before animations on sacred geometry were even common.
Okay.
So someone released it, and we don't even know who released it. And no one talked about it. They just they typed up some of the information that it forms a pentagram, then a hexagram, and that was it. And it was just like jaw dropping. So I'd still like to know. I still don't know who made this, but I'll check when we finish this. I'll check on my website that it still plays. It's a very rare piece.
What
of
other celestial geometries are like that? Like you mentioned, the one in Saturn and Jupiter. Are there any other ones that you know off the top of your head? Like any with Mercury, Venus, Mars, Earth?
I think there's Mars and Saturn. I think that the when you look at Mars, as Mars goes around the sun,
Mm-hmm.
its circumference, the distance that it travels, becomes the radius for Saturn's orbit. There's all these interrelationships between circumference of one planet becomes the radii of the next one, and they all kind of dovetail into each other.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going back to Kepler's work. But it's all described in John Martineau's books,
Mm-hmm.
a little book of coincidences. That's like a classic, little book of coincidence
His name
by
is
John Martineau.
John Martineau.
Yeah, John Martineau, French name.
Oh.
Yeah, so and there's a lot more coming out there's so much amazing good information coming out on the celestial geometries.
Mm-hmm.
You could spend your life just looking at that alone, just that topic.
Interesting, very interesting. I actually never heard of John Martineau before.
It's spelled Martin, Martin, Eneau, like water, Martineau. One word, John Martineau. And I met all his students when I was teaching in New York. I met a lot of his students, and they were trying to get me to meet him. We didn't meet up, but so I met a lot of his students.
What about Kepler? You talked about Kepler having this type of work. It sounds. I did a little bit of research into orbital resonance. Have you ever looked into that stuff? Orbital resonance?
No, I've heard of it, but it sounds fascinating. I love the title. I love it, but
it
can't
goes
say
into
I know.
details what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I'd love to, like for my research and creating this harmonic dictionary, I'm looking at things like hertz and cycles per second and stuff that I can include in my dictionary. So I'm sure there's a lot in there that I don't even know about.
Likewise. Yeah. What about magic squares? You mentioned that term a couple of times. Did you ever look into the magic square that's in the Spanish cathedral? It's in front of the Spanish cathedral. what's its name? I'm trying to think right now.
Oh yeah, that's my mentor, Gaudi.
Yeah.
Gaudi. Yeah, I have to go to Barcelona because I'm a bricklayer by trade and I worship Gaudi's work. And I've been saying every year I'm going to go to the Sagrada Temple.
Sagrada, correct. It's
Some
Sagrada, yeah.
Familia or something.
Yeah.
So I worship. I've got his book right here somewhere.
Hmm.
And but yeah, no, they used a magic square of 4 by 4, so I know that image well. And it's just a typical magic square of 4 by 4. But there's 880 permutations of that. There's that magic square that you see is only one of another 880 possible magic squares where all the sums of the columns, rows, and diagonals, they all equal 34. So that number 34 is called the magic sum. It's a constant. It's an eternal thing. It'll always add up to 34. So that's how my dictionary of harmonics has started, is that I'm looking at all the things that will never change. So magic squares are a great source of knowledge for any child, and that's my starting point. I've always been obsessed about magic squares, and I still am. And I keep detouring, and I keep coming back to them.
Magic squares. So what does that number in front of the cathedral represent, actually? Did you ever decode that? I mean, you said 34, but how do you put that into context?
Well, because like I said, there's 880 snowflake versions of that. They're all like, you could, again, no one's really studied the whole 880. I've got them all listed in a rare manuscript. I used to go to libraries. There was in the 15th century, in the 16th century, a French book was written on the 880 permutations of that square we're talking about. So I got a copy of it from our libraries from France, and it's all written in French. So the numbers are there, but there's been no research on it. No one has actually even gone down that pathway. There's so much. But so just to see one out there doesn't mean anything. Like, it could have been less. Gaudi knew some secret knowledge. Like, let's say he's part of the Freemason, could be part of the Masonic order, and they had to get that vibration out there for some reason. So he could be sitting on a whole portal of knowledge, represented by that square. So I don't know. And actually, maybe I'll look into it because you've mentioned it. I'll look into it.
What significance does the 180 have?
What's that?
What significance? You mentioned the 180. What significance is that number?
No, 880. Sorry, 880.
Okay.
And
what significance does that number have?
There's no obvious significance at the moment. Okay. Whereas when you go to the first primal magic square, the 3 by 3 magic square in China, that's the first harmonic in space. Like, that's the first time that 9 numbers, back to number 9, can rearrange themselves so that everything is equal. Because the 2 by 2 square, then you can't take the numbers from 1 to 4 and make them all add up to the same. It doesn't work. So it has to. So order happens at the Trinity. So when we get to a 3 by 3, it all adds up to 15, and there's a whole universe of knowledge on that. But there's only one. And when we get to that, there's 8 versions of it. So you can have 8 different magic squares of 3 by 3. And then as soon as you go to 4 by 4, it jumps to 880 versions. And as soon as you go to a 5 by 5 square, where everything adds up to 65, you're in the millions. You've already gone to like millions. So these are like the fingerprints of God. They're all harmonics, and we haven't even started to research them. So my original, since high school, I had a name for my future school, even when I was 20. So it's called Freedoms. It was an acronym. The word freedom stands for research expressing essential data of magic squares. So in my consciousness as a 20-year-old young man, I was already obsessed about magic squares then. So I feel like this is all like soul memory. I've known this knowledge. The knowledge is in my cells, and I just need to remember it. So what happened for me was that when I hit 27, I was living on an eco village in a community west of Sydney, and I was releasing all these codes on magic squares into the community. So I started doing giant murals. I used to be a full-time muralist. So I was using sacred geometry on big walls, and then some force tried to stop it. Someone came when night just started one night, and someone just put a blade right through my chest. So I had a death experience. I was out of my body for 2 days. I left my body, and I've got another amazing thing happen when I was in another world, and I came back, and that's when my name changed to Jain. So that name Jain, before that I had an Arabic name, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
I had another name, but so when I was 27, I died. I was releasing codes, and I came back with a conscious decision that I'm here to teach children these codes, and that's where the Jain name came, and that stuck. So
now, what relation does that? I'm going to assume, and maybe there is no relation there, but changing your name from Cole to Jain, is there
yeah.
a numerological base for that change? Is there any significance in that?
I'm not sure actually. My birth name was all 999. Everything about my birth date and birth name,
Okay.
according to a Pythagorean system, was all 999, which kind of says, well, obviously I've had a lifetime interest in the number 9. But then when I changed my name to Jane, and that it became 7, and I'm living at a house called 777. I'm living at 777 Left Bank Road, so a lot of sevens. I'm not sure how I'm not sure how they're related, but I realized that in my life, because I had a very strict Arabic upbringing, I'm learning now at this age in my life is to embrace the Colin that I rejected. Yeah, but that was Colin that left university and went and lived in the jungle with the Aboriginal people. So Colin was someone that was a part of myself that I don't need to negate. I need to embrace Colin. Colin just didn't fit into society at the time, because I grew up in a very rich family, and I was meant to become a doctor and doing business, and I just felt that wasn't my pathway. So and yeah, it's interesting because my father was a learned man, and he came from Lebanon to Australia, so he was on his quest. He was looking for a better life than living in a poor village, so he came to Australia from rags to riches and made his millions. And yeah, so really my father is my teacher. We're doing the same thing. We're both he was a maths teacher in Lebanon, so we're both mathematicians. It's just that we teach different types of mathematics.
What about numbers and mathematics in the Bible, in the Judeo-Christian Bible? Do you have any experience with that?
I'm more interested in the Muslim Bible. Someone done a thesis. They cracked the Quran Bible, and it's all the number 19. 19 is a prime number. So when you study the Quran, everything is written in like 19 syllables, 19 verses, 19 sentences, 19 chapters, 19 everything. And whoever wrote the conclusion is that when you study the maths on the Quran, no human could have possibly written that Bible. It's beyond human intelligence, because it's so mathematically encoded, every word, every sentence, every syllable. So that blew me out when I first studied the Quran. I've looked at the Christian Bible. So I see the Christian Bible as definitely a great history of the planet. Even though things got changed in translation, we still have to acknowledge it as a historical importance. But yeah, there's some beautiful things with the numbers 153 fishes. There's a lot of cryptic stuff in the Bible that I still look at all the time. But yeah, the parables in there are beautiful.
Okay, what about this? This is a last question I really wanted to ask you, and I think it's very relevant. So Nikola Tesla had a very famous saying that I think anybody interested or experienced in this field even remotely has heard this before. He said if you wanted to understand the universe, you have to think of everything as energy, frequency, and vibration. How does that adage fit into mathematics in your discovery and in your research?
Okay, no, it fits in. Look, basically this would be a good way to conclude, is that I was going to become a doctor, but I think at the full circle of my life, when I've done more research and concluding my life, I think I will become a doctor, but a doctor in terms of vibrational medicine. Let's say the future of our work, it's not just mathematics, it's about healing. And so I believe that every organ in our body is a number, a frequency, a hertz, a cycle per second. So let's just say, I'll just grab one of these stickers, just as a, let's just say this magic square adds up to say 260. That what makes up this pattern is a magic square of, let's just say it's an 8x8 magic square. It's actually it's this one here. These are some of the stickers I'm making. That's the prime number cross. This is the magic square of 8x8 that I'm going to use my example with. Okay. So I'll put that down. This is a 7x7 magic square for Venus. Okay. This one is from the multiplication table, the atomic structure. Yeah. So this one's a proper story. So here we have Benjamin Franklin's magic square of 8x8. If you look across here, it says 8 dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8x8. 64 numbers, has to do with DNA. 64 is 4 cubed. So let's just say that if you have a healthy liver, if we analyzed 1,000 people and got the mean average of the vibration of a healthy liver, let's say it's vibrating at 260 cycles per second or hertz. So this magic square, the numbers that make it from Benjamin Franklin all add up to 260. So this is a harmonic of 260. So my theory, my research is that I believe, and I've done this, I believe that if someone if someone is sick and has a really bad liver, it means that their liver's not vibrating at that template of harmonic perfection of 260. Let's say that their liver's vibrating at 200, which means it's very sluggish or weak or ill. I believe that if we place this magic square of 8x8 on that person's liver, it's a bit lower, but just for the screen. Right. If we place this memory of perfected health on the liver where it's lacking, I believe that this will transmit or translate or do some kind of vibrational uplift to help the liver to wake up and remember who it was, because that's the definition of sacred geometry. Who am I? Oh my God, I forgot my original purpose of vibrating at 260. I went off track, and now I'm sick. I went on to lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, but now I remember that, and then the person wakes up, they remember who they are. So I believe that's the case with every organ. So that's why I'm doing a series. This is just between you and I. The reason why I'm obsessed now about decals and stickers is because I know that the shape stores the memory. So you don't need to tell a child it adds up to 260. There's some, in fact, the highest math, just to conclude, I've done a lot of research, and I believe that the ultimate mathematical code on the planet is the numbers that make up this sticker. So if you go on my website, I just did it. If you go onto my website, on the homepage, on the right side, it says decals and stickers. Okay. I've got 8 to upload. I've only uploaded 3 of them because I need the next week to upload the all 8, and then I'll make an announcement. Decals are available. But if you go on and look at the 8x8, it's called Twin Flames, because when you look, even though it's a line drawn from, I'll just show it. There's a line that goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It does a dance. It does this pattern. It crosses over. It completes this one, and it crosses back over. And you can see that it looks like, I might take it out so you can see properly. Okay. Because of the plastic, but it crosses. It looks like 2 entities, right? Like twin flames. Right. But if you look at the bottom here, along the bottom, is a single line. That's actually part of the magic square. If you drew a line from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, it connects there. I haven't made this up. It's really beautiful, abstract, symbolic art, but it represents energy, you know.
And these are going to be all available on your website?
Yeah, they're available now. Okay. I've got them. I just need this week to upload them.
Okay. I need. And what's the website for all the listeners? What is the exact URL?
So my website is www.jainmathemagics.com. Okay. JainMathemagics. So jainmathemagics.com. Okay. Yeah, so by next week I'll have all the decals available. But if these 8 are resonance, you're talking about resonance before, if people really vibrate to these and they like them, people can actually use these for healing. I haven't actually advertised that part of it yet. I just want to see that people respond to these designs, because they're very abstract. I mean, what does it mean? Why would a child want to get this? I'd probably get something more like this, you know, that it's more a starburst. And just, can you see the symbolism here, the ring of writing? Yes. It says earth, 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 which reads heart, heart, heart. But if you look at it again, it actually says, hear the art, hear the art.